Welcome to the Tech Exits Podcast. In today's Buyer's Corner, we'll explore the M&A landscape from the perspective of top acquirers, gaining insights into their acquisition strategies, challenges, and lessons learned. In this episode, we're speaking with Jean Royer from Levio, a digital native business and IT consulting firm that helps companies navigate digital transformation. Founded in 2014, Levio has grown to a $300 million company with 2,000 employees, focusing on sectors like banking, tech, government, and telecom. Jean joins us to discuss Levio's approach to acquisitions, including how they select companies, manage integration challenges, and maintain transparency throughout the process. We'll also dive into his advice for founders preparing their companies for acquisition, emphasizing the value of preparedness, cultural alignment, and building trust. So, let's begin. Thank you, Jean, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Jean, can you tell us about your company?
Sure. Levio was founded 10 years ago by our existing controlling shareholder. Back in 2014, our founder, the former regional leader for IBM in Quebec, saw an opportunity to create a digital native business and IT consulting firm. The new high-speed and low-latency 5G networks would allow for massive IoT connectivity and access to the cloud infrastructure. So it became clear to him that the market for digital native firms with agile processes and organizational structures would accelerate very fast. So he formed Levio to take advantage of this development. Levio's mission is to help companies succeed in their digital transformation. Levio means agile and light, reflecting its entrepreneurial spirit and model and flat organizational structure. Levio's offering is business and IT consulting services. So basically, we engage with the C-suite executives of our clients to define the future target operating model and how our clients want to interact with their customers. We then build a multi-year transformation roadmap, and we help our clients choose the appropriate technologies to achieve the transformation objectives, and we deliver the transformation and its associated benefits. Today, Levio is a $300 million revenue company employing 2,000 people.
Very interesting. So, if you can tell us a little about your acquisition mandate.
I'll start by saying that an acquisition is simply a faster way to achieve a business goal. Everything can be done organically. It simply takes a lot more time. So your question comes down to our business goals and how they can be broken down basically in three components. So we can be looking at adding a new complementary business practice, or reinforcing an existing business practice, or expand geographically. And on this third element of geographic expansion, we build on our existing strength that are our core market verticals, being BFSI, so banking, financial services, wealth management, and insurance. This is a big vertical for us. Then TMT, tech, media, and telecom is the second big one. Then governments and utilities. So we then take a close look at the client list because it has to offer a significant source of revenue synergies. And finally, we obviously have preferences over the service offerings. So our preferred acquisition platforms are cloud migration, AI, BI, and data company, or consulting firms that have strong partnerships with leading technology platforms. So in terms of our acquisition mandate, in the first 10 years of the company, it was primarily focused on acquiring new business practices and reinforcing existing lines of business. And in phase 2 of our mandate, which started earlier this year, it's more about geographic expansion in North America in our core market verticals.
So moving on to the next question, how has the landscape for tech acquisitions changed in the past few years? And what trends do you foresee?
Well, the increased cost of capital has slowed down the M&A market somewhat in the recent past, I would say 24 months. And strategics became more selective and more disciplined on valuation multiples and also more stringent on deal terms. Private equity funds held back on selling their assets, mainly on lower valuation concerns. Now, with the cost of debt going down, and hopefully it will continue, the pent-up demand from private equity funds and entrepreneurs is coming back to the market. And strategics have an appetite for specialized service offerings, and we see rich valuations for assets with relevant value-added service offerings supported by strong growth and strong margins. So these assets command a challenging valuations for acquirers, which in turn requires acquirers to deliver on the execution of value creation plans.
And at what stage of growth do you typically look to acquire companies, and why?
Well, with the focus on the geographic expansion in North America, and with the advent of a new growth equity partner to our capital earlier this year, we're looking to acquire companies with a minimum size of 100 employees and up to a few hundred employees for the right assets in the right verticals with an attractive client list. So we're talking companies with revenues of roughly $25 to $75 million or an EBITDA of $5 to $15 million. We're also looking for situations where entrepreneurs want to continue to build. This is an important feature and differentiating factor of our M&A offer. We are a private company, but we use our shares in our deal structures. It can be up to 20% of the value, depending on the deal size and the distribution of the ownership. So sellers can have a second liquidity event when they sell these shares. Today, Levio has more than 200 shareholders in our capital structure, which is a bit unique for a private company. The majority of these shareholders are key employees that have been invited to buy shares in the company, but approximately 25 of these employees are selling shareholders of acquired companies. So in summary, the target deal size is a factor of the minimum size to enter a new geographic market and also the strategic fit.
Now, as an acquirer, what about the acquisitions process is the most difficult?
Before answering this question, I'd like to mention a prerequisite condition before entering an acquisition process. And it's true for us, and I would think it's also important for any acquirer. And it may sound obvious, but it is to have a level playing field, which is necessary for all parties. It is a necessary condition to induce potential acquirers to spend time and effort to evaluate an acquisition opportunity. And what does it mean? It's essentially about providing the same level of information to all and also offering a unique process and timeline for all parties. So the integration, I would say, is the most difficult part, probably in any circumstances, but more particularly for service organizations, which success depends on critical elements such as client relationships and delivery resources. So the need to preserve the intrinsic value of the acquired company is a primary concern. And then the need to bring the necessary ingredients to achieve the value creation plan, which basically involves sharing the vision with the respective leadership teams and assembling the new offer, build the use cases, and the go-to-market strategies of the new company.
That's a great segue into my next question. What are some key integration challenges you typically face post-acquisition?
So the first I would say is employee anxiety. And changes always bring anxiety. It's just human nature, and acquirers have to recognize this and find a way to deal with it. It's just normal. So another golden rule for me is over-communication is not possible. You cannot over-communicate. We have to work with the selling shareholders and the leadership team of the acquired company to explain to employees the transaction rationale, obviously, but also what's in it for them. as employees. And as an acquirer, we should never make promises that cannot be delivered down the road. If we don't know an answer to a question that's being asked to us, just say we don't know and come back with the proper answer that you know you can deliver down the road. So acquirers and selling shareholders must not forget that employees have not asked for a transaction to happen. They're not part of the decision. Therefore, acquirers cannot take for granted that this will be good news for them. We kind of, it's good news, we're going to acquire. No, it generates anxiety and we need to deal with it. Second element is cultural differences. So company values may conceptually be aligned, similar words, but they may be lived very differently from one company to another, for one culture to another culture. So even words, even the same words can have very different meanings depending on the company. An example is the word caring. Caring is a buzzword these days, and it can have very different connotations in different cultures. A caring value in a client-first culture may be very different than a caring value in an employee-first culture. So we have to be conscious of this. Client management and operational design may be very different from one organization to the other. An example is client management can be by market verticals in an organization and by geography in another. So in the integration that will generate changes and change management. And finally, it always comes down to technology and systems integration in the end. So it is a challenge in itself in any organization because the day-to-day will change for all employees. The technology tools will not be the same. The business process will change, etc. So it's very important for the acquirer not to understate the importance of change management to support the important transition for the new employees.
Based on your experience leading M&A transactions, how long do transactions take from start to finish? Is there an average time?
Yeah, so I would broadly define 3 phases of acquisitions. The first one being the identification and courting phase of the targets. The second one being the deal making itself, the transaction phase. And then the third phase being the integration. I would think your question probably refers to the transaction phase. So I'll talk about this one. So it normally starts with the signing of a non-disclosure agreement. And from then, the main deal phases are the negotiation of a LOI, a letter of intent. And that can take probably between 4 to 6 weeks to agree to a LOI. Once that's agreed, then we get into a due diligence phase, which would last normally between 6 and 8 weeks. And then another 4 weeks to negotiate the final agreements, the share purchase agreements and the employment agreements or service agreements if they would be needed. So in total, realistically, I think we're talking about 4 to 6 months from the signing of an NDA to the closing of the transaction. And most importantly, the factors I would say to reduce the time, understanding that time is risk, is the prep work, what I call the archaeology, finding the information from a seller standpoint. So to be prepared, finding the information, structuring the information, and presenting it in a coherent and consistent fashion. Form an internal team and ideally a dedicated team as well. So that depends on the size of the company. It's not always possible. But if the team is not dedicated, then it has to be a top priority to handle the process, the M&A process. And then hiring external advisors, M&A and legal. And finally, thoughts have to be made about making the process competitive, because when you have a competitive process, then you have an additional ingredient to shorten the time frame if you can keep it competitive as late as possible in the process.
It's interesting what you said about having advisors, because most of the people that we've interviewed, probably around 80%, even if we don't ask directly, say, hire an advisor. It's a common insight we hear. You need a strong team supporting your transaction to ensure a perfect execution. Now, you mentioned the time from the NDA to closing of the transaction is about 4 to 6 months. How much time do you dedicate personally to the transaction, say, per week? Because I'm guessing you're also handling multiple transactions at the same time. So how does it work?
That's an interesting question. A transaction in itself is a full-time job, but it will happen that we will have, and I have a very, very small team, I should say, but it happened that we had maybe 2 at the same time. And the thing here is at some point you have to make decisions, because you really do have to be able to provide the effort when it's needed. M&A process is very complex, and it's very key for the success of this process to keep the momentum from every party. And in a leadership role, when you are the M&A leader for the acquirer, it is your job to make sure that there is momentum in the process and that things get done and that the plan is clear. So every process is very demanding, but clearly, when the opportunities are there, you have to be able to handle multiple processes at the same time and find the solutions to make it happen with a combination of external resources if needed. But it's very demanding process.
Not just demanding, but competitive as well, which brings me to my next question. How do you handle competition during the process? What do you do to stand out?
So generally speaking, sellers are looking to maximize price and minimize conditions. Really, these are the 2 main things. So we really have to be competitive, obviously, on the above matters. But we have additional appealing features in our M&A offering. So I did mention, I think earlier, we are a very entrepreneurial company. So an entrepreneurial company is very different than a big global consulting firm, if you wish. So the mandate in the new company is very and will be very different for the acquired company. We also have stock in Levio for a second liquidity event. And given our relative size, which is small, acquired companies can have a significant impact on the future of our company and therefore on the direction of our stock price. So it can be very, very interesting. We are a digital native company, flat organizational structure I mentioned earlier, so lots of room to grow professionally for these new people within our organization, which is different from larger firms. So our offer is ideal for a group of entrepreneurs that want to crystallize a part of their investment, but also continue to build and benefit from a second liquidity event eventually.
All right. What common mistakes do you see founders make when preparing their companies for acquisition?
We sometimes see companies coming to market underprepared and already excited about the potential valuation that they've heard about. I would say a golden rule is you never are over-prepared. Never. It's like for an exam. And coming too early in the story of the company can be a mistake. So, for example, a company that just made a pivot and just won a large client, which is reflected in significant client concentration, it may not be a good idea to come to market too early. You have to have a history that helps support the future and the prospective growth that you're showing the acquirer. So the history, a history that does not support the future in terms of growth, in terms of gross margin, and declining SG&A, or all those together, often it's all the 3 together, is not very credible. So I would say sellers have to come to market well prepared and for the right reasons.
Indeed, to your point about it being like an exam, it's really about education. Being properly educated for the process is key. Okay, so what are deal breakers for you during the process? Have you ever had doubts during a process before?
We did. It doesn't happen very often, but for example, undisclosed material information that was known by the seller and that has a significant impact on valuation, that is detrimental to the process, and that can lead to a loss of trust. And that's a loss of trust with your future partner. So it's very key. These things should not happen. Transparency is very important. Non-compliance with laws is another one. We expect companies to comply with the regulations that they are subject to. So this is very important because in making an acquisition, if it's a stock deal, you're buying the history of the company. So that's very key. And the third one I would say is leadership retention issues. And that comes to the perennity of the asset that we're acquiring. So these are service organizations, and we understand that people don't stay forever, but there has to be a plan to bring succession and to bring perennity in the cash flow that we're buying, because in the valuation, that's basically what we do. Yeah? We value a perpetuity. So the sellers have to have that in mind, that we're looking for perennity of the asset as an acquirer.
I think this ties back to what you mentioned earlier about having an advisor is key for a successful and smooth transaction. A good advisor can spot these potential issues so they can be addressed in advance. So I want to dig into that a little more. Can you identify the critical team members and advisors a seller needs on their team to ensure a smooth M&A process from your perspective?
The first is obviously a legal advisor, and usually these people are very experienced and they are the trusted advisors for the entrepreneurs. I would say that it may be that the trusted advisor is not the expert in M&A. And I would suggest to keep that trusted advisor as an advisor, but also reach out within the firm, probably that they have someone that's an expert in M&A. There is value from a seller standpoint, but even from an acquirer standpoint, because when we have to explain all the reasons why we asked for a certain element in the share purchase agreement, the best seller for this, if the ask is appropriate, is market, it's the trusted advisor of the sellers. He's the person who will explain his client, this is normal that an acquirer asks for this. So as an acquirer, I always get comfort when I see very competent people that have done M&A transactions on the other side. I see this as a plus, not as a risk. So it's really a plus. And then the M&A advisors, and why? Because it's a unique process, it's a complex process, and to have experienced people dedicated to these kind of complex process is important. It does add value. So yes, there are fees and success fees associated to this, but the value is in my view, if you have good advisors, well in excess of those costs. And it helps free up time and valuable management time for this process.
Lastly, what advice would you give to founders to make their companies more attractive acquisition targets?
So I guess the first step, and there's probably many shareholders, the first step really is to consult the other shareholders and define together and agree on the reasons to sell. You have to know why you're going to market and what are the objectives. Second step is to consult as well your trusted advisors or any other outside stakeholders, because for most people, it's a first and it's the last time. So you don't know what you can't know. If you've never been through a sale process, it's a pretty unique thing, a very demanding thing. So you have to consult and gather information about what it means to go through this stuff and what are the key success factors. Know the why and define why it's important and what you're looking for in an acquirer. Acquirers are different, and beyond the traditional maximize the value and minimize the conditions, it's important to look for what I call a good home for your employees. This is also a consideration. So think about what is it that you're looking for as an ideal acquirer. So never forget the golden rules. So you're never over-prepared. Set expectations that you can meet or exceed. Missing expectations on a financial forecast during due diligence is not good news, and this is going to drag your process. So you don't want to miss on your targets. And keep in mind as well that it'll take you and your team time away from your business. So try to set up yourself so you can continue to care about your business, but it will take time away from your business. There's no question about that. So in the end, be prepared, set expectations that you can meet or exceed, and articulate a business plan that supports the financial plan that you're putting forward.
Wonderful. Jean, thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining us today. Are you considering selling your tech company? Head over to quorumgroup.com, our tech exit sponsor. If you'd like to learn more about selling your tech company, join us at one of our Tech M&A Masterclass events. Attendees of the Tech M&A Masterclass will gain practical knowledge on how to achieve the maximum valuation for their company, gained through expert-guided workshops, hands-on exercises, and M&A case studies. Upcoming events in Barcelona and Las Vegas, or online through our virtual conferences and webcasts. Head over to WFS.com for more details. We'll see you again for the next episode.